Alright, so the stock's fully sanded down now, quite smooth, but we have a few problems. We've got a cavity here, and we have a cavity here. So we're going to fill those. There's no point in trying to sand down to that, get that out, because we'll end up changing the shape of the stock. So my preferred way of doing this is to use a French polish. So I grab a nail, just the head of a nail like this. Probably use a smaller one if you wanted to. Dip it in the French polish and lay it in the hole there. Now I'll get a small sanding block, some 360 grit sandpaper, and we'll just sand. We'll build up a little bit of sanding dust, and then we'll go over the hole, over the cavity. So that cavity no longer exists there. Now this one here, down the bottom here, is going to be a lot harder to fix. It's quite deep. It's also, we've already checked this stock in this area. Probably should have fixed this first, but anyway, we'll fix it and we'll just recheck at the bottom of the stock down here. Not a big deal. So same process. Now this may take more than one go. So what we'll have to do is attempt to fix it now. Probably won't fill the whole cavity. Then wait for it to set and come back in a few hours and do it again, or tomorrow. So once again, I'm in a pretty tricky spot down here. So we have begun to fill it in. We haven't fully filled it in here. So we'll wait for this to dry and we'll do it again. We'll probably get it in 2 or 3 goes. So we'll do the second coating or iteration of this filling of this stock hole here. Just a bit more. Looks like it's going to take another go to fill that, so we'll do it again once this is dried. Alright, hopefully the last one of these. I've picked myself out a smaller nail because the hole is so small now. Just put a tiny bit in there. There you have it. The hole is gone now. So we'll just have to recheck this tiny little area where we've done a little bit of sanding and clean out the checkering itself, but job done. So we filled the imperfections in the stock. You can see there's no longer a hole over here. Fixed up the checkering. The stock has been sanded to as fine a grit as we normally use. And now we're going to use a sealer and filler. Now this is pretty much the only commercial product that we use on any of our restoration work. The issue with walnut is that it's porous. It's got tiny little air pockets in it, and on the surface it's actually porous. So you have to, it's called filling the grain. Now, there's 2 ways of doing this that we sometimes use. One way is you sand the stock and you leave the sanding dust on the stock. You get some boiled linseed oil and you rub that sawdust into the grain. My preferred method is using this commercial product because it dries a lot faster. It makes the stock a bit harder and more durable, and it requires less coats of oil to finish the stock. So I'm going to use this one. I just apply it using a bit of clean rag, And it's quite simple. You don't even have to do that great a job because we're going to sand it after anyway. So it's just a matter of applying it onto the stock fairly evenly. Now we've got to make sure that we don't get any on the checkering, because the checkering, well, we don't want to fill the checkering because that would defeat the purpose of it, of the work we've already done. So it's quite a thick product. It's good too because you get to have a look at what the timber grain looks like. Somewhat what it will look like when the oil's applied. So I'll go ahead and finish this off. It doesn't take long to dry, maybe 2 hours to fully dry, and we'll get back to sanding. So the seal is set. It looks a bit glossy, but it's not wet at all. So now we're just going to, I got some 240 grit sandpaper here on a block, and I'm just going to sand this back all over the stock. And I'm going to sand until I start hitting the wood and the shine is taken off. So this is just down to the wood here. So we want to leave that sealer into the top part of the grain of the wood so that it's filled. So I'll keep going like this. I'll show you what the stock looks like after I've sanded it all over with 240 grit, and then we'll go to some finer grits. That's what it looks like after the 240 grit. Bit rough, but that's okay. We're going to go over it with the 360 grit now. Same method, just with the grain here. And when we're done with that, we'll finish it off with some 600 and it's ready for finishing. So thanks for watching, and we'll get to finishing next, I'd say. So we're going to start, this has been finished now down to 600 grit. I'm now going to prepare the stock for finishing, and it's a good time to clean it off with just some mineral terps here. And it's a good opportunity once we wipe it down to see if there's any scratch marks from the sanding still in the stock, and it gives us a nice idea on what the stock's going to look like. So it looks a lot nicer like that. Shame the mineral terps is going to dry off pretty quickly. Okay, it's looking pretty good. I can't see any scratch lines in this wood. It'd be a disaster if we finish the finishing and then we notice some scratches. So let's talk about stock finishes. We use 2 different products that we make in-house. This is a boiled linseed with alkanet root steeped in it. It's been sitting like this for about 6 months. So it's just linseed oil with alkanet root. That's all it is. We use it to darken and redden the wood. So we don't use commercial type stains or whatnot. It's alkanet root that gives it the colour. And then the other oil we use is slacum oil, which is a mixture of, it's mostly boiled linseed oil. It has some carnauba wax in it. It also has Venice turpentine and spirits or pine spirits in it. It dries relatively slowly still, and on colder weather I'd have to leave it for about a week. Warmer weather we can probably do it every 3 or 4 days. For this project though, this stock is already quite red. So we're not going to use the boiled linseed with alkanet root at all. It'll just be a matter of using the slacum oil. I use it simply by placing a small amount on the finger and hand rubbing it into the stock like this. You need as least as possible to cover the stock. The more you put on in one go, the longer it takes to dry. So it's better to do many thinner coats than it is to do one larger coat. So I've dabbed my finger in once to do one side of the stock, and I've dabbed my finger in another time, so 2 times in total to do this whole stock. And the heat generated from rubbing it like this helps to push it down into the pores. So there, coat number 1. And this may take maybe 7 or 8 coats. So I'm going to hang it up now to dry in the window so it can dry a bit faster. So here we are with the finished stock here. It's been probably maybe 2 months of drying involved. Don't even know how many coats of oil we've used on this one, because it's usually a function of when I'm happy with it, not the number of coats, but I would say at least half a dozen. And there's the forehand. So I will put this gun back together and we're pretty much done now.